If you have such faith in your country, in Zimbabwe, I would say and I would think you would get up and you would take your family and you would go and fix up the future of Zimbabwe. If you're saying there's land, if you're saying there's minerals, if you're saying there is so much wealth and opportunities for you there, you're living a contradiction.
No, I'm not living a contradiction.
You certainly are by sitting here. You're living a contradiction. Because people are suffering in Zimbabwe.
So why are people not
languishing
why
here?
are people not going to the Netherlands? Why are Germans not going back to Germany? Is it because their countries are bad? Is it because they're running away from problems in the UK or in the States? Why aren't Europeans going? What are you doing here?
I live here. This is my home. I'm not running away from
it. But why are you living here instead of Europe? Why did your great-grandparents come here instead of Europe?
We're not talking about grandparents. We're talking about me.
No,
we're talking about you.
So guys, let us jump right into this video. This is a very informative video. It's about President Mugabe, and we have two Zimbabweans who differ and who Mugabe was. But I find it very interesting. Take a listen to this interview and we'll discuss it a little bit as we watch it. So take a look.
Very much for joining us and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much, Leon.
So, you know, there have been very different views about the former and late President Robert Mugabe's legacy. Let's get your starting point first. What do you think his legacy is?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that what has been problematic is that the legacy that we have seen assessed by people hasn't been his legacy, but it has been about trying to seek faults in what it is that he stood for. But otherwise, Robert Mugabe was a humanitarian who stood for making sure that black people get emancipation. Emancipation that allows them to also have property rights and be able to ascend to being seen as humans who can self-determine without having to be mastered by anybody else or to be looked after by other races. And I think that's what Mugabe stood for. He was also a liberator and a man that made sure that he emancipated black people by ensuring that he gave them the best education, access to their resources, control to their resources, and also a Pan-Africanist who made sure that he defended Africa from imperialism.
Yeah. So, you know, everything that you're saying, some people may agree with it, but a lot of people may disagree with it, and I'm sure you're widely aware of that. A lot of what you speak about the former President Mugabe is very much so what he stood for years ago, and that was what people were attracted to him about, and what he really, really uplifted the country and promised a lot. But when you look after all of the years in Parliament and you look what's been left behind, many say that there truly is a humanitarian crisis happening in Zimbabwe, and this was just such a bad legacy to leave behind. What do you say to critics?
I say to critics who say that they might as well say the same about Churchill. They might as well say the same about Charles de Gaulle for what happened to France during the German invasion, because what we have in Zimbabwe is a country that is under war. It has been attacked by US war sanctions. 16 million people are being collectively punished because of the successes of what Mugabe achieved, because we live in an anti-black world that believes that black people do not deserve access and control of their own resources, and Mugabe was punished for that together with the Zimbabwean people. But when I look at the metrics of what it is that Mugabe achieved, the fact that the Americans decided to call Mugabe and Zimbabwe an unequivocal threat against the United States interests because of giving black people access and control of their resources tells me that Mugabe was not really a failure, but what is happening in Zimbabwe is the country is at war, and that's what's causing the problems that we see.
People are starving in Zimbabwe. People don't have electricity. People don't have water. People are on the streets. They're leaving the country. They feel that there are no opportunities, that the country's falling apart. It's not serving them well. What are you talking to? I mean, why are we blaming that on sanctions against Zimbabwe? I mean, this is not, do you not believe, a leadership failure?
I don't believe it's a leadership failure. I believe that we've also got 50% of all Europeans living outside Europe. We've got 5 million Europeans living in South Africa. And that is also because of the fact that people migrate because they've got skills. And a lot of Zimbabweans that are in South Africa have also been attracted to South Africa and recruited to come to South Africa by companies that need their skills. That is testament to the skilling that Mugabe gave Zimbabweans and the education that he gave. Yes, we do have a crisis that is being caused. Refugees are coming into South Africa. Refugees are going all over the world. But a lot of that has to do with the sanctions that are on Zimbabwe. And what I always never understand is how it is that it can be justified for Germans to leave Germany to go to the United States because of the war that took place in World War II, but Zimbabweans cannot be accepted to leave their country when they're under economic warfare that has been imposed by a superpower like America together with the entire Western world.
Yeah. If we look at the turnout, though, not the turnout, but we look at when Robert Mugabe was removed as president, what happened there? I mean, what did you read into that?
What I read into the issue of Robert Mugabe's removal was because there was uncertainty as to who was going to take over after Robert Mugabe. There was talk about Grace Mugabe ascending. And I believe one of the greatest weaknesses that Mugabe had was the fact that he never communicated adequately with his publics. He never communicated adequately with his citizens. And that doubt that was left as to who was going to replace him was the problem. But we understand that it wasn't even Grace Mugabe who was going to replace Mugabe. It was actually a man called Sidney Sekaramai who was supposed to come after. But that is one of the problems that they were.
Let us stop it right there. This is what they have been, this kind of propaganda is what they have been preaching to us for years now, calling our presidents dictators. My take on President Mugabe, he was a very brilliant president in his earlier days. I think the only issue I have with President Mugabe was he stayed too long in power. So in his last 10 years, he should have left. And that's where his legacy started to drain like that. That's where his legacy was attacked, because in his last days, he did became like a different person. So, but what he did prior to his 10 years of dying was great with the taking back our lands, free education, free healthcare, and making sure we own our lands and mine. And he also helped with put things in place for the mines to be owned by Zimbabweans or the government. They won't be sold out to the highest bidder. So he did a lot of great things. When he was a Pan-Africanist, he was we are blacks, Africa is for black people. So that was a brilliant, what he did. There was no bloodthirsty dictator. That's what they're trying to paint him out to be, because if that's the case, we can also talk about what happened to one of their heroes, Napoleon. Napoleon killed almost 20 million Africans. Well, yet they still have him as a hero. Let's talk about every European president, French Sarkozy, who destroyed Libya, President Obama, President Bush, who killed millions of people in Afghanistan and Iraq. His father, Bill Clinton, did the same thing. He did a lot of atrocities, which is because why? These are American presidents, so they have them as heroes and as good guys when they did way worse than African presidents. Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue.
Okay, so joining us here now on the program, I had said that he was going to join us as soon as he could, is Balazan Peter. He's a Zimbabwean journalist and activist discussing also the Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe's legacy. Thanks for coming. I'm glad you could make it just in time for the interview. We've been having quite an interesting conversation, and I've been hearing the views of our guest here in studio with us, talking to Zimbabwe, with our Zimbabwean president, Rutendo Matanyane, who is saying he was a humanitarian, he was a liberator, he was important with education, and he was a non-apologetic leader who's left a great legacy behind. What are your views on this?
What great legacy has Mugabe left? Mugabe is a remorseless tyrant. He destroyed a country. Why is Rutendo here? Why am I here? We are here because our country has nothing to offer us. Why are millions of Zimbabweans here? I just heard him say, why are Europeans in wherever they are? I missed what he said. We are here because, not out of choice, but because of circumstances. We have to make a living. We can make a living in our own country. Let's not romanticize bad leadership. Mugabe is an eloquent example of how not to run a country, a textbook example of how not to do things. He destroyed a country. And I find it a huge shame that there are people who see a hero in Mugabe, a liberator who used all these phrases that my brother is using to describe a man who, in simple terms, was a very bad leader, destroyed a country that in 1980 held so much promise.
Yeah. If you look at the turnout of his funeral, though, and you look at the send-off for the former president,
The turnout was very poor.
was it poor? Because it looked like he got
it was
a
an empty.
hero's
There was
farewell.
no. There were several heads of state. Okay, heads of state attended, but the National Sports Stadium was virtually empty. You can see it from your visuals.
Yeah. What do you say? I mean, are you living in South Africa, Rutendo? Let's ask you that question. Do you live
Yes,
here?
yes, I do live in South Africa, and I think it's very important for Basilton to be able to take his context and not use that self-reference to think that that's my situation. I was offered an opportunity to come to South Africa in 1999 by a South African company that offered me a work permit while I was in Zimbabwe. I was working as a manager in a company, and I came to South Africa because of the opportunity it offered me in the marketing space. So I did not leave Zimbabwe because of the fact that Zimbabwe was not good.
Good
Number
for
two,
you, but
a lot of
millions that are here.
Number two, there are a lot of people
have
that are
not
in
had
South
those
Africa that have run
opportunities.
away from land to come waiters in South Africa. They've run away from mining gold, platinum, diamonds, and resources to come to South Africa because they would rather prefer to be given a job by somebody else to use their CV rather than to take over the land, take the resources, and use those resources to become rich the way that it has made the
See,
Rhodesians rich.
why don't they? I mean, if that's what you're saying, they're running away from those wonderful opportunities. Why don't they take up the opportunity? In fact, why don't you take up the opportunity? Why would you come and make your fortune here in South Africa when, as you've described it, you could be making a fortune in Zimbabwe? Why are you here?
Because I'm part of the problem in Zimbabwe. My attitude of thinking that I had to come and take up the opportunity that was offered to me here
So why don't you go
instead
home?
of mining
May
land.
I ask you that? Why do you not
I am
go
going
home?
home. But
Are
right
you?
now, I've also got family in South Africa. I've got South African children, and those South African children don't just allow me to just stand up and leave, but I do have projects that I'm taking part in Zimbabwe because I've learned that those resources are the most important thing.
If you have such faith in your country, in Zimbabwe, I would say and I would think you would get up and you would take your family and you would go and fix up the future of Zimbabwe. If you're saying there's land, if you're saying there's minerals, if you're saying there is so much wealth and opportunities for you there, you're living a contradiction.
No, I'm not living a contradiction.
You certainly are by sitting here. You're living a
ask you that
contradiction.
why,
Because people are suffering in Zimbabwe.
so why are
but
people
you're
not
languishing
why
here.
are people not going to the Netherlands? Why are Germans not going back to Germany? Is it because their countries are bad? Is it because they're running away from problems in the UK or in the States? Why aren't Europeans going? What are you doing here?
I live here. This is my home. I'm not running away
But
from it.
why are you living here instead of
There's
Europe?
great
Why did your
opportunities and I
great-grandparents
love
come
this
here instead
country.
of Europe?
We're not talking about grandparents. We're talking about me.
No,
We're talking about
you've
you.
made
I will just pause it right there for a minute. And this is what I don't like. This is why I don't like some of our people, like this guy here, who is strictly anti-Mugabe and anti the way he speaks. You can see he's a coconut, brown on the inside, white, brown on the outside, white on the inside. And this is what I'm talking about. When we still have this colonized mind people, the way he's speaking about Zimbabwe is not that because Zimbabwe has come a far way from. You forget Zimbabwe was heavily sanctioned, heavily. And the Americans, they did everything for Zimbabwe not to rise to the occasion. They did every single thing. They have insurgents attacking, which they are funding. They have mercenaries who's going to destabilize the country. And there's a few corruptions in Zimbabwe. I'm not gonna lie. And but President Mnangagwa is not a puppet, but he do have some traits that's it's typical because every president have certain traits, but this guy, the way he speak, you can see the disdain he has for this fellow Zimbabwean brother next to him and his country. Anyway, I like what the guy said. He's gonna go back to his country and with his knowledge and help to create a better future. And he's right. When you come to see when he came to South Africa, now he has a family. He can just pick up and leave. You can just tell your kids and your wife, we're going back to Zimbabwe when you have a life here, their schooling is here, their whole life is here. No, he have to make sure he go and then prepare a place for them. You can just root them up and go. And you notice this guy, you notice she's not answering the guy when he said, Why don't you go back to Europe? Why are you here? You're not an African. Oh, I'm a South African. No, you're a European. Why don't you go back to Holland or France or wherever you come from? But you want to tell us Zimbabwean and African to go back to Zimbabwe. Africa is for Africans, and that's why I love Julius Malema when he said, I cannot turn away my brothers and sisters from South Africa. No, we're all Africans. We have borders because of the Berlin Conference in 1892, where when they divided Africa into borders. That's what caused us to be divided. We need to get to that for you Europeans to get out of Africa. That's where we need to go, and that's why this coconut make this. Anyway, let's finish the video.
It sounds like a Zimbabwean needs to go back to
No,
Zimbabwe
no,
to
no,
show
no,
that
no.
Zimbabwe is working.
We-
So why are Europeans not going back to
context-
Europe? Why are Asians not going back to Asia? Why are they
The
staying in South
context of
Africa?
the conversation is that you're saying that Zimbabwe is a beautiful country with great opportunities and people have run away from there to become waiters. The context is you are living here in South Africa when you could be going back and making that country work. That's
But
the
you also
context.
forgot
But
that you also forgot that I was asked to come here. Somebody thought my skills were important here.
I've been
and I
asked to
was
go
asked
to other countries, but I believe in this
But the
country. and I
5
refuse
million-
to
But why
go.
don't you believe in Europe?
No, I believe in South Africa.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
I believe in my country.
Why don't you
So
believe in
is-
Europe?
This is not
he-
about me and you. This
is
is
he
about
saying-
Zimbabwe.
But you-
But let's
your question has
just
to
talk
apply
here.
to
Is
you
he
as well,
saying,
though.
is
Okay.
he saying the 5 million, 6 million Zimbabweans here were also asked to come here, like he was asked to come here? No, they were not asked. They jumped the borders out of desperation. They are here to make a living because their country has nothing to offer for them. Zimbabwe stands now as a destroyed country. All hope is lost in Zimbabwe. It doesn't help that the man who succeeded Mr. Mugabe is not doing any better. You saw when Mr. Mugabe was ousted in the military coup, the thousands and thousands of Zimbabweans who thronged the streets in celebration, who held hope that at least Mr. Mnangagwa was going to do things differently.
Yeah.
It's said that he is following in the footsteps of his former boss, and there hasn't been much change. But Zimbabwe is now a desperate, destroyed country. We cannot defend the indefensible.
Yeah, very, very quickly. I mean, we've run out of time. I ask you in 30 seconds. Just Mbeki says Mugabe's dream was to see other oppressed African countries free, which is, of course, why he supported the ANC in its liberation struggle. Is that a fair comment?
Well, it's a fair comment that Mugabe spoke for Africa's liberation, but that's not the issue. The issue is Mugabe's record in leading his own people. He destroyed the country. Zimbabwe is now completely a hopeless state to live in. I've been in Zimbabwe. The life there is so difficult.
Yeah.
So difficult. Why? Because of Mugabe's bad policies, because of Mugabe's bad governance.
Yeah.
So let's not mix issues here. Yes, he might have supported the ANC. So what? Many other people supported the ANC.
Okay. We have to leave it there, unfortunately. I'm sure you want to have a closing word.
Yes, absolutely.
And in 10 seconds, very quickly, please.
Absolutely. Yes, Zimbabwe has got its benefits, but we also have to acknowledge that it's at war. The entire Western world, a superpower nation, has imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. And the fact that Basildon doesn't talk about it, I find it very
But the
interesting and very
sanctions have
weird.
been imposed because of what? The bad things that these people are doing.
But where do you get that from?
Where do you shoot your people? When
Where do
people
you get
go
that
to
from?
demonstrate and you deploy
Okay.
soldiers to shoot them.
All right.
Surely the civilized
Where
world
do you get
is not
that
gonna
from? Where-
condone it. We have
Where
seen
do you
it,
get
but
that
we
from?
have
When
seen it.
when did the sanctions
Gentlemen,
come in?
unfortunately-
Where people
When did the sanctions come in, and when did the
the
people get
sanctions
shot?
were imposed in
All right, this has been quite a
in
fiery
response to
episode
what
of
was-
Morning
to
Live
what
here.
was
What a way
happening.
to end off a Friday. They can continue having their conversation. We unfortunately have to say goodbye to you. Thanks for watching.
So guys, so that's the end of the video. So let me know what you think about this. Do you agree with the first guy or the second guy, the one that came in the half part, the one I call the coconut, and or the first, the one that he was invited to come to South Africa, get a job, get paid, and make a family, and they want know that. Let me know which part of the coin you fall on. Which one? Which you find on the left or the right? Let me know in the comment section. As always, tell a friend, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.